today. I want to talk today about what I'm currently calling the authority story, or our authority story. This is new. As some of you know, when I developed the workbook for foster carers, and when I was putting all my energy into that, I developed a style that was stories. And I developed a sort of whole style and in a way, Pelham ambition and a Pelham way of working that are fictional stories. I call them composite characters, in the sense that they're a composite out of my relatively long experience in life. So they weren't about a particular person. It was about that's why I call them composite. It was a composite of different things from different people, and different experiences. And I developed them in particular because I felt you can say more in fiction than you can if you're doing case histories. I mean, my first work and where really I made my reputation first, was writing case histories and treatment plans. That was, as most of British Columbia, Canada. And then, my career since, and being aware of the place of case studies in the field. But in developing the stories, and the reason I want to put the background in, because the idea of the authority story, and each of us having our own authority story, which is uniquely ours. It's, I guess our authority story, put simply, is our resume or CV with bells and whistles, and anecdotes and things we're proud of, and maybe some things we'd, not so proud of. But I developed a whole approach when I was developing the stories for the foster care workbook, that was, if you're writing a case study, just the same as if you're writing an autobiography, if you're writing a biography, you've got a certain set of guardrails. You have to protect the person you're writing about. You've got to be fair about them. You've got to sort of be careful about material that might be of the nature of exposing or confidential material, secrets, drugs, sex, crime, shame, divorce. We've all got our own human story. And if we're writing a story about a person, if we have a character in a novel, we can get at everything. But in a professional case study, I felt you couldn't, I'd almost say, delve quite so deeply into the human soul, the human heart, strong, as I've said, our strong places and our weak places. And I found they worked well, and they work really well, I feel, as a training device. Because we write about a foster care or a social worker or foster child, young person in care, and put in elements that simply would not be appropriate and wouldn't be fair, wouldn't have integrity if it was a case study. So I got into writing these stories. Yeah, and it's a different part of my work that developed over, maybe the last decade or two. I like it. I really like it. Elsewhere, I've written about it extensively, and I guess what I call the theory behind the Pelham stories. Because in the work, I now have this category called Pelham story, capital S, as well as a capital P. And, it's a challenge. I can get them wrong. And in the workbooks, I'd always have they sort of run into a bit of a cul-de-sac, which I'd like to get over. But if they once again take off, the aim in the Pelham workbook format, which I think is on the website, is that in time, the stories would be replaced by someone doing their own stories for their own workbook. And, because of, computers and word processing, all of that's happened to take something out and simply replace it with something else. So that's the background. And then I was doing quite a bit of thinking through and writing about, which I've, shared with you, our concept of authority. The structure of our accomplishments and our achievements, and in some sense our purchases. My library is not particularly professional, but it's very extensive. It's quite big. And, in a sense, that's sort of personal to me. They're my books. But as a collection of books, that's very much part of my authority. I feel it as part of my authority. Property we own, cars we have, maybe, guitars we've collected. Maybe someone had 15 guitars. That will be authority. And the thing I want to present, this is the first time I've presented this actually. Anyway, there is something empowering that we can take on, and it's, the authority story, capital A for authority, capital S for story, or it's my authority story, Peter's authority story. And if we go into that for any of us, it is totally and absolutely unique. The way that someone got their degree, or the way someone had a career without their degree, without the degrees, someone getting through college, someone's first job, anything you take, our authority story would be unique and specific to us, as a couple's marriage is unique and specific to them. And I've often noticed when we do feedback, and in particularly, you know, when we do it on training courses or in Italy, and it's all written down in journals, and then I always want to talk people into typing it up or getting it typed up. And to be absolutely frank, none of us do it. I've always meant to do it. I've not done it. And it's very interesting because this is feedback that someone's given us in a therapeutic learning situation. It's coming from people who are skilled and in a position, we are in a relationship at that time of considerable trust and caring. And, you know, and the Pelham process is the feedback written down in somebody's journal by their support partner. That's a particular little part of our structure. Anyone in a program or a training course, people have a support partner, you know, essentially a buddy system. So the support partner writes down someone's work and someone's feedback in their journal. You know, that's pretty powerful stuff. I mean, it really is powerful stuff. And in the literature, that's what I call it a life-changing program, life-changing holiday, and would stand on that ground. But I can never do it myself. And I don't know anyone else who's taken the time to type out the work and the feedback. And yet, when you think of it, you know, those of us who've been in careers, the amount of time we will spend writing out an application for a job or writing out a proposal for a grant, you know, we put all energy and concentration and skills and discipline into doing that. But we won't quite take the same time to do it about the stuff that's about us. Something odd about that, okay? Just something odd about it. And I know that if people do type out their feedback, if I type out my feedback on my work and really read over it over time, you know, given it was good in itself, you know, I'm going to get considerably more benefit if I've got it in a way that I can study it, I guess, put it that way. There's a certain way we'll put the time and energy into a job application or a grant application. And we'll certainly put the time into writing papers for university courses. It's expected of us. We will do it. We'll do it as well as we can. But we can't quite put the same energy, discipline into writing up stuff that's just about us, okay? So that is where when I was thinking about those things, I thought, yeah, let's have in the Pelham training process, let's have something called the authority story, which is, I guess you could say it's our journey in our work. That's a broad brush to it. But once you get in, and the importance of the Pelham stories that I developed for the fostering program, and now the authority stories, the importance is to get at the details. You know, to get it when we found a way to be committed or get recognition for a particular part of our work. You know, what were the really important things in our authority story? And I, in another place, I developed some work about sort of delicate moments that are almost fleeting that can make a big difference to us. It was a thing one of the papers I presented to my philosophy club. And that was about these sort of fleeting moments in our life when something really significant happened. Someone really made a difference. And in that situation, the example I gave was, I don't think I've told it here, but if people have heard it, bear the repetition if you could. But it was about Mr. Reed. And it was my last year in high school, Manly Boys High School, that was in Sydney, Australia. And Mr. Reed was in the vice principal, the words that were used in Australia back those decades ago. Mr. Reed was the vice principal, and he was in charge of discipline. He was like the second to the head teacher. And we were all sort of afraid of him, and I guess we were a fairly noisy, you know, slightly rambunctious bunch. It wasn't a mixed school, it was an all-boys school. And, you know, we were all sort of quite scared of Mr. Reed. I think he was short and tubby, but that's not, you know, the way he appeared to us at those times. And, you know, he called me in once. Said, you know, come in, Fleming, I want to see you. And I said, you know, what have I done wrong? Because this is the guy that you get called in if you've done something wrong. And I'd written a paper, a composition. I can't remember the title of it. And he had it in front of him when he called me in. And he said, I want to talk to you about this. So I was relieved I wasn't in some sort of, you know, disciplinary, I wasn't in some sort of disciplinary trouble. And I saw he had the paper had a lot of red marks on it. And he sort of looked at it and saw the red marks and saw me looking at the red marks. And he sort of, you know, brushed them away, you know. You sort of can't spell, but let's not worry about that. And then he started quizzing me. He said, because my father was a school teacher, and he knew my father was a school teacher. He said, who wrote this? I said, well, I did. And then he said, who helped you? And I said, I wrote it myself. And then he said, where does this phrase come from? Much ado about nothing. And I said, it's Shakespeare, isn't it, sir? And then I think he took his glasses off, looked at me, and said, you can write. Okay. He said, you really can write. There's parts of this that are just excellent. I can't remember the words he said or what else he said, but you can write. That stayed with me ever since. I think at the time, I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell my friend, I don't think I told anybody. But that was this sort of, you know, an incident in my authority story, okay? And I want sort of authority stories to be therapeutic. I want it to be part of a therapeutic learning process. So we're getting at those sort of details. And, you know, I could talk on about it more and put meaning or whatever into it. But mainly it was just those two words from that man at that time. And while he asked me the questions, you know, who wrote it? Did you get help? You know, why do you use this phrase and where did it come from? He somehow or other could conveyed to me that they were just questions he was asking me. He knew I wrote it and he liked what he read. Absolutely conveyed that to me. And I think we all have, and then I'm sure I or any of us could, you know, the times when we were rubbished or taken down rather than the times we were built up. And it's those, I want the concept of the authorities story to include all these sort of details. So it sort of gets to be long. It's like doing, you know, a long piece of therapy or a piece of therapy over time. And in a way, it's just common sense. In a way, there's nothing particularly original about it. There might be something a bit original about it just in having the structure. But having the structure, I think, has been my journey. And just for now, taking the word authority in a sense, but also meaning, but also realizing that a pretty straightforward way is our working life, in some sense. Good, you know, broad brush definition. And I guess I want to develop it so we all go into this. And as I just did, I think often with colleagues or family or partners, I think we often share anecdotes about our authority story. But I want to take it further than that. I want to sort of put it all together. As something, going back to where the Zoom meeting started, we're something that can really lift us. You know, this is my journey, and whatever my, you know, whatever my losses, and you know, to me anyway, you know, he was a man who lost all the time, right? I mean, he got to be vice president of the United States, but that was only because he, you know, was forgiven and picked up by this other guy who was obviously going to be the president of the United States. And you know, he'd failed and been pushed aside and had losses and then decided to run and then was just humiliated, right? Up to South Carolina, Joe Biden was nowhere. And then all of a sudden, you know, what, he's the hope of the Western world, I think. You know, if you put that in the framework of an authority story, it's pretty exciting. I think our authority story can be quite exciting. And I think within Pelham, we can find a way to link it to purpose, to link it to even the authority equations, which I won't go into today, but maybe we'll revisit them in a week's time. I think it can be something that's very positive, which is always my desire to have that's why I call it the therapeutic learning process. Because it doesn't have to focus on, if I want to learn something, it doesn't mean I got a problem. It's my problem. It'd been my problem with my field going way, way, way back. You know, the point of entry is, what's your problem? If I want to learn pottery, someone doesn't say, well, what's your problem? I just want to learn pottery. And that's a struggle with the medical model and all that.
Can I come in with something, Peter?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell if you couldn't hear my hand, see my hand, and you were wanting to finish your run through, but I found this very exciting, and so I got a couple of things I'd like to share. And the first one is relating back to what you said about those special moments. I forget the phrase you used about your "you can write" story. I have two about Helen that really changed the whole course of my life, but I'll just tell one of them. And I went, if it was the first time or I'd been for a short time, but I went to Pelin for probably the last winter program, which was, I think, 3 months in the winter, small program. And I went because it was the only light at the end of a tunnel where I didn't want to exist, where I was quite suicidal in a really passive way, but in a very bad depression. And I spent the whole 3 months, when we weren't doing group, I huddled over a fire and read books nonstop, and I was frozen, I couldn't speak, I was full of shame, and I felt such a mess and such a failure. And just towards the end of the program, it makes me tear up, Peter said to me, I want to train you over the next 5 years. And I once wrote a paper about that as a positive trauma, because it sent a sort of electric shock through me, that through underneath the misery of my daily existence, when I was depressed, this person I respected could see some talent and want to train me. That's like a really huge moment in my life. Can I say my other couple of things?
Yeah.
So I'll try and keep them brief. So I had a really interesting, last session we did the community strand and official professional strand. And the first thought I had was, oh, I was developing authority in the community strand, so not getting much recognition for it. All the time I felt like I had no authority, because although I had some authority inside Pelin when I was in the UK, nobody knew what contribution training was. I was building authority in the community strand as an advocate for mental health recovery. I always sign off, my Gmail signature has that. It's not called upon very much, but I absolutely think of that as part of my authority story, that I'm an advocate for decreasing stigma by my transparency about my own struggles. But the other thing I realized about authority in the community strand is that I'm really proud of the retail work I did when I was young. I worked in a florist from 15 to 19 when I went to university after a year gap. I worked in a florist, a greengrocer, and a bookstore. And when I was at university and took too long a vacation and got thrown off the professional register, I also worked on the night shift in the motorway cafe near to my university. And what I'm proud about in those is I really experienced as a youngster serving the community. I really appreciated being in a service position. The motorway cafe one was hard because I felt I didn't like being thrown off the professional register. But when I had to do it, I did it, my tables were cleared and quickly, and I served people nicely. I took pride in serving people. So that just suddenly clicked. Oh, well, that's in the community strand. In the official strand, it doesn't count for anything. So I thought that was exciting. That's it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because I forgot to put the link in between today and Wednesday, because I meant to start this by saying, no, the authority, if we are in, or mainly in, or fair bit in the community strand, our authority story can be really important, because the community strand simply does not have the authority that the academic and professional strand has. And we have to work on that theme. So we're not just coming off like a clever critic, but we're saying, hey, we've got something to offer. We can build bridges to you in Pelham because we've got the truth line. You've got your bit of the truth. We respect that. We've got ours. We'd like you to respect ours. We've got a fairly nice place to stand on. But I think having our authority story more available to us. So almost without the, I had a important person in my school in my last year at high school, and he gave me some really good recognition about an ability he felt, talent he felt I had to write. So it rolls off my tongue a little bit easier, rather than when I talk about it with the tightness, which I did because I don't share it very often. And then I think if we have our authority story, then we can hone it down. So it comes off quite clearly. This is what I've done, because the conventional thing in the academic professional strand, what we, I guess, also call the official strand, is, this is my PhD and this is where I got it. Or even, these are positions I've held. It's sort of all official and tidied up. But in the community strand, I think like a politician's good stump speech, you need to be able to say, this is where I come from. This is who I am.
Can I just add a little tiny thing that just popped in? Because I've been to some meetings of White People for Black Lives, I received an invitation that was going to 100 people to train. I've forgotten exactly what it was, but to train in some way to be like an advocate within White People for Black Lives. And that's very much community strand, right? Of developing authority in the community strand. So I am going to do that because I think that's such an important thread in what's happening nowadays.
I think if we apply this to the two strands, I think it's important for us to have our authority story and to have an easy way to present it.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Just the thought I had coming off the first thing Mary's saying about her story. It just reminded me when I was a teenager, I had this job in a roadside fruit and veg stall. And there was always a queue of people. And there was probably about 5 or 6 of us girls working there. And we all had our own button on the till that we had to press before we typed in the amount and you had to sort of run around, a pound of apples and a pound of bananas, and you know, and add it up and put it on the till. And one day, the man who owned it, just at the end of the day, just called me over, and he must have taken the till roll out, I think, of the machine, and he just quietly showed me, just from the top of the till, and he showed, and then I understood all our names were along the top, and he sort of rolled it down with his hand, and it got down to Brenda Taine, who was always standing leaning on a sack of potatoes. So that was the number of customers she had served, right? And it went on about a third as far again after her, and there was everybody else, all the other names, within about an inch of each other. And then he kept on rolling it down and down and down, another third, and there was my name. So I was serving a third as many as the average people, and that was his way of showing me. And he put my wages up to £3 a day, 1970 whatever. And I was just thinking, you know, that felt like authority. And now I think of it, it still feels like authority, because it was recognition of a lot of things, competence, you know, being responsible, being responsible and efficient, taking a job, whatever it is, seriously, and not looking for being lazy, and not, you know, just not thinking that way. Just a whole attitude. And I think in that moment, I really got a lot of sort of self-identity feedback about myself. And then I noticed Mary said, I don't quite know what it was connected to, but said, oh, I guess that's in the, you know, the community field. But I'm thinking, no, that's in the work field, even though it's nothing to do with what I do now. But it really connected with me and gave me a piece of information about myself as a worker compared to other people. So I don't know if you've got anything to say about that.
Well, I guess anyway, I've forgotten why I developed the Mr. Reed story for the philosophy club, because that's looking at things philosophically, and I was really intimidated at first, because they're academic philosophers, and, you know, quoting everyone you're supposed to quote, and I was coming from a different place. But I guess my authority story, I've made a place for myself there, and they made a place for me there. Now, I'm presenting things from a slightly different angle, but still with a sort of philosophical perspective. And I know when I told the Mr. Reed story there, and I think it's relevant to what you're saying, Nikki, it was a presentation on tenderness, and it was sort of, not going to it now, but it was based on the last act of King Lear, when he's coming in with Cordelia, who's dead. And the tenderness is profound, in the language it's profound. So that was the bit I was sort of taking off from my paper at the Philosophy Club, where we meet the first Sunday of every month in a room above a pub in South London. It's sort of quintessent, there's something quintessent English about it. I love it. In London, I love it. And now we meet on Zoom, by the way, which is different. But I think I was just presenting a particular thing there, the importance of some of these fleeting, tender moments, okay? And him showing you that, the way he did it, had some of that quality, Nikki. And the thing I sort of set out in the philosophy paper, just how important some of those moments are. In a very quiet way. Yeah, I talked about a very light touch. I'll try not to digress. But I think they can be a very important part of the authority story. And unless we find a way to present them or have a structure in which they can be presented or shared or, you know, put out there to you and get feedback on it, all of that, particularly those with some very significant tender moments just get lost. But we know, you know, I was talking about Mr. Reed, and well, I must have been 16 and a half. You know, you, Mary, were talking about, you know, 15 to 18. Nikki, you were talking about being, you know, a girl, 15. And those three moments were important. And I think within our concept of authority and within our concept of the detailed Pelham stories, I think there's a place for them.
Can I tell this?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nikki.
Okay, thank you. This small Rod Stewart story. Maybe a couple of years ago or something, I heard for the first time this song that he obviously recorded way back, maybe early, I don't know, 20 or early 20s or something. And it's so passionate. It hits you so hard passionately at the beginning that you just know, wow, these feelings are still raw in that boy when he's written this song and performing it there. And it goes, the first couple of lines are him mimicking a school teacher of his, and then the next couple of lines are his reply to himself. And this is clearly him, I don't know, 2 or 3, I don't know how many years later, must be singing on stage, you know. Anyway, it goes, Stuart boy, you'll never be much because you're too busy acting the fool. And then in himself he goes, thank you, sir, for them few kind words on my last day at school. So it's this massive put down to the teacher, saving this put down to his last day at school, you know. And the recording, it's like, wow, he's so, and look at me now, you know, you arsehole. So I guess it's a funny way of, you know, those were words, the antithesis, right?
Yes,
of authority,
yes,
but he totally flipped it over and used it.
Yeah. And
it's on an album, you know?
Yeah, and that's the authority story. You know, look at the authority he built, okay? And still has in his grasp. If we just go into the authority equations, certainly socially accepted force, okay? I'm not a follower of pop music, but I know who Rod Stewart is. Still getting the recognition and satisfaction at his age. How old is he, Nikki?
I think 74, 75. Like
right.
That.
Yeah, still getting the recognition and satisfaction. And further, still carrying out the responsibility, okay? I think, I can't remember if I've told it here, and only know it because of you, Nikki, but I've got to tell the true rest story about Rod Stewart. He has this massive model railway, and he's working on it all the time. And he can keep going. I sort of take that when I just want to spend a lot of time rearranging all my books for no particular reason. I thought, yeah, okay, if Rod Stewart can have his model railway, I can have all my books.
And he did it in hotel rooms, in gigs during, you know, waiting for the next performance.
Yeah.
Paint tiny windows on office blocks that he'd made out of cardboard or something.
Yeah.
Well, mine's, can I come in with my little bit, I realise? Because I think it's interesting how it's harder. You know, I'm finding this really exciting because I'm thinking of things to do with the community authority strand, call it that temporarily. I just suddenly remembered, oh, wow, I was taught by the florist I worked for to the level of people, there's a very famous school of floristry that I've forgotten the name for the moment, but she trained me. She trained me over the 3 years I worked there to make the funeral wreaths and wedding bouquets, as well as the bouquets you sold in the shop, to a professional quality. And, you know, sometimes I've used it, like at Mother's Day and Mayflowers and stuff. Mostly I don't use it, but it's, if you've done the equivalent in the academic thread, you probably wouldn't kind of forget about it because it's
yes.
kind of more tangible, but it's still very real. You know, I could still absolutely do that. I did for my wedding. I made my wedding bouquet with all the techniques I learned there, and it's very dear to my heart. So I just wanted to mention that because I think it's interesting how community stand things can disappear a bit from our awareness.
I just have to hang up for a minute and I'll call back in a minute.
Okay. Nan, do you want to come in?
I was thinking, you know, this is part of my struggle with launching this independent business is my kind of reluctance or inability, or to use Peter's word, shyness about claiming authority. Yeah, so, I mean, if I think to childhood, I recall a teacher complimenting me on my curiosity. And I do think that's helped me in my life. I mean, I rely on my intellect a great deal. I don't know that I claim any authority. I was like thinking, you know, I didn't even, when I dismantled my office, I didn't take all my awards with me. So I think I'm struggling a little bit. Authority has been applied to me. I don't know that I've ever claimed it. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I struggle with, and it, you know, it's not that I feel incompetent. So it's not, you know, totally like, it's just, I have a hard time, I think, claiming my authority.
No, that it really fits that it was sort of given to you and
yeah, it came from it was bestowed upon me.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
and
yeah.
you know, Cincinnati's not New York or LA.
No, it's really not.
So people knew at a very young age you had all that authority.
Yeah, I do think that's right. And so it is, you know, it's partly my challenge at this phase of my life, not having, you know, nobody's bestowing shit on me. So it's kind of like I'm having to find it inside myself. It's just a very different phase of life. And I used to say to a friend of mine, you know, what are we going to do when we're not young and bright anymore?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you know, and so I think I'm kind of in this phase of having to, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Peter, can
I
I come
think
in?
in a different, yes, Stacy.
I just was thinking about a teacher when I defined a word in automatopoeia, and
Yeah.
he accused me of using a dictionary. That just made me so
Okay.
angry. It insulted my writing ability. It's like, dictionaries don't use automatopoeia. I said, was a
Yeah.
creation of the, like, what is an invention? It's a creation of the imagination that makes a new task easier or different. And he's like, oh, did you get that out of the dictionary? I'm like, no, I wrote that.
Yes. Yeah.
And it just, oh, I got him back later. We had a desk drop in his class. Of course,
I
we got
missed the
detention
word
for
there.
it.
Say it again.
We had a desk drop, you know, like in America, we drop books usually to show dislike for a teacher. We drop our books on the floor and then walk out.
No, I didn't know that. Tell me about it. I've never heard of it.
Well, it's a form of disrespect to the teacher that you drop
And
your
what's it called?
textbooks. It's called a book drop. You drop your textbooks on the ground to make a loud noise, then you pick them up and head out. Well, we dropped our desk, and then he had to pick them up after we left.
Wow.
But eventually, I felt guilty about that, and he found out I organized it. So me and my friends got detention.
Okay. Book drop. I like that.
It was
I
like a
think it-
form of authority, you know, taking authority at a young age.
Yeah.
I'll show you.
Yeah. The bit I know about drop, which won't surprise anyone, but me liking so much when Barak gave his last talk at the News Correspondence Club. That's one where they make jokes. And when he finished it with dropping the mic and walking off. And dropping the mic like that is a claim of authority, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess it's inevitable, it's just sort of the nature of the beast, that there will be more rebelliousness in the community strand. So we probably need to have an awareness of that and some discipline around it. You know, the authority story fits because we needed to back it up. Do you want to come in, Cynthia?
Yeah, I've been thinking, we were thinking about the authority story, and I'm thinking just like a jumble of different, things that happen, but something that I was thinking about, a contrast of two different things, and it was surrounding my family. I was raised in a lesbian household, and the first, but it had also had problems. I mean, it did its thing. But the first authority part of it was a negative one. I had written, we had to write a thing about your family in second grade, it was. And it was actually my favorite teacher. This was really hard, Miss Mastro. And I wrote, well, my mom was divorced and she lived with her best friend. I didn't know what that meant. And, it was more than that, but I didn't know that. And I wrote it, and the teacher told me, and everybody, and a lot of people had their little stories on the board, and she says, you know what, this was a really good writing, but I can't put this on the board. And, because it talks about divorce, and who's this best friend? What does this mean? And I remember being very devastated. And in fact, I tore up the story. But then later, I was a junior, and no, I think it was a senior in high school, and I wrote there was a teacher who really liked my writing, and particularly he had us write a lot of personal things, and I wrote a story about visiting my great grandmother, and then I wrote a story about something I've told here about when I kind of stood up to people who said, "Oh, your mom's gay." I said, "Did you think I didn't know?" And I wrote it, and he told me, and I still remember, he says, "You have the kind of writing that can really change the world and can change people's ideas." And and thinking about it, and it's funny because I've always had with writing, I have like a love-hate relationship with it, particularly if I've got to do something personal. And it just dawned on me, you know, the whole the second grade, you know, the contrast between the second grade teacher and the high school teacher, and wonder if that plays, if those memory links might be playing into that love-hate relationship. So
yeah, when you think of having said that, or one can only hope things go really well, but George Floyd's little daughter saying, "My daddy's changing the world." She just lost her daddy, and she's saying, "My daddy's changing the world." I mean, with huge, huge, huge respect at all, I want to say that that's a claim for authority. And talk about contribution from hurt. I mean, I can't but be amazed at those moments. Cease.
Well, I was thinking about a new thing that I'm going to be doing. This is a volunteer thing with the Quakers have an organization called Friends Committee on National Legislation. And if you live in the U.S. or but if you live in the U.S., you might be interested in, you can go on and find all kinds of different issues that are coming before Congress, and you can write a letter to your congressperson. And they have ones that you can build on. But you could also do in-person meeting with Congress people if it's arranged by Friends Committee on National Legislation. And you can do that on your own, but also recently they asked me to do a couple of them with Marco Rubio from Florida on the SNAP program. That's a program for children, nutrition, food. And I think there's some more aspects to it. And I did one already, but now this next one, I think I'm going to be asked to do it on my own. With you don't meet with the congressperson, you meet with one of the representatives. So I'm trying to build up my authority here by looking up all I can on child hunger in the US, which is pretty big. It's like 14 million children are in poverty, and a lot of them are food. There's a certain word for it. Food. It's underfed, basically. So I'm trying to work on that. So and of course I have my degree that I mentioned before, but that's part of the authority.
I missed a word there. You have your...
Oh, I have my PhD. It's in
Yeah.
development. So I have that, but also I think the other part of the authority is knowing what I'm going to be talking about. So to have some knowledge there that I can share, and maybe on a personal basis too, of homes that I've visited that were very impoverished. So I'm nervous about doing it on my own. I guess, I don't know whether you would consider this authority, but being able to, it's not exactly a speech, but be able to give a short like paragraph of what I want to say, and be able to say it without fumbling around. That would be something. I don't know how. I'm sure they're not expecting somebody with a huge amount of ability in that area, but you do have to be able to talk to somebody without getting upset or getting tongue-tied, that kind of thing. So that's a different kind of authority that I'm working on. Does that still fit with authority?
Oh, absolutely. And it fits with having our authority story, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because you absolutely have both strands going for you. But, you know, coming in as a PhD, you know, some people can dismiss that.
Mm-hmm.
But combining that with stuff you don't know, well, I did this in Africa, and we did this in prisons. You know, then and the and your base camp, Quakers. I mean, they have both strands, but they certainly, as well as being a church that's established, been around a long time, you know, they have always had stuff that was in the community strand that was quiet, or, you know, they had to keep secret, you know, before the Civil War. And I think having it neat and tidy like a stump speech fits with what I'm presenting as the authority story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I probably just need to practice it. The really, and usually the aides are very non-confrontative. I've only had one person that gave me a hard time. This was on another visit a long time ago. But our strategy is to be non-confrontative with the aides. Oh, bless you. And so you can't do a hard sell. You have to be, you want to hear what they have to say, what are their questions, and not get upset. You know, it's a very upsetting thing to think there's 14 million children in poverty in the US. It's more than some of their population. So, yeah, I think I want to practice and not be able to be sound better than, you know, something better than, but more equal. Something, because I don't want anybody to bristle. And
but
because they can get, I could see somebody getting a feeling, not that I've done it, but I can see somebody feeling put down. So it's kind of a fine line to walk.
Yeah.
And I think that's true from what I've been hearing too, with people throw their authority around. It's not a very good scene. And when people can present it as part of their story, then it's much better. Like when a teacher's overly more like a little king or something, that's not using their authority in a positive way. So so anyway, that's all I have to say on that.
Yeah, I think that's just terrific. And I mean, it could, well, it's a heartbreaking issue, isn't it? Hesitating, you know, it's just a heartbreaking issue, and it could get worse, and it's unnecessary. So I think
I'm going to write down necessary. That's a good point. It's unnecessary.
Yeah, unnecessary. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that part of it. Yeah, and heartbreaking. Those are, and usually you're talking to a congressperson who has some interest in the subject. They're not
Right.
totally interested, or you wouldn't get a time slot. But how, it's kind of interesting, how well are they able to assert their authority in Congress on what they
Yeah.
believe
Yeah.
versus the blowback they know that can come. So we have to talk in a way that's appreciative of what they're willing to do. So, you know,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a good one. It's a good one for authority story too,
mhm.
because that is, there's going to be new voices that are around this issue. That's for sure.
I feel like I'm building my authority in that realm
Yeah.
of being able to talk to aides of senators and
Yeah.
representatives are usually well, they're usually Republican. I mean, they're not Republican. They're usually not Republican.
Yeah.
Mine is not Republican. So I
Yeah.
have an in there already. But if they are Republican, then I need to, here's what I feel like. I need to not see them as the enemy. I see them as a potential partner. You know, I see them as somebody that could make some movement in the direction we want.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
So-
Yeah,
So-
because I mean, Rubio wants to run in 24, no question. So this could be a very good issue for him to get behind.
Yeah, it
It
can
could
be
be.
that about, I hate children to eat, you know, that's not good.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's pretty simple.
But it's difficult still. So,
Tamar, do you want to come in?
Yes. You know, I was Cynthia, your story not being admitted with the other children's, and just the authority that teachers have, and the Rod Stewart come back. There's something going on in England, man. I mean, if I remember listening to Pink Floyd's The Wall when I was a kid and wondering just how bad is this schooling experience for everybody in England. It sounds but I remember in grade 7 in middle school, I did a science project along with the other kids who clearly lifted stuff out of encyclopedias in that day about the workings of the inner ear or whatever. And I had done my project on time. And once again, being an odd kid, I think I just didn't, I was tone deaf to the culture, the general culture of the school age. So gave me a C+, and I remember working hard on the obvious strip and little chicks throughout, like little, cute little yellow chicks that were having dialogues and explaining things in easy language. And my guess is that it was probably a beautiful job, but regardless, his reason for giving me the C+, he said, is because there was so much to take in, to read. He said he found it boring. And so I kept it in my closet, the exhibit. It got more and more kind of crushed, and I would look at it a lot with shame, but I also kept it because I was proud of it. And it became later in life, it was kind of like I began to feel like I had this personal authority that sometimes I would do something that would get the general grade of. And also there were times when I felt like teachers were using their power over me and threatening me with low grades for example, I was in a film at one time and I wasn't allowed to do a makeup exam, and I had to choose between passing that year in his class or not doing film. And I just knew that there were going to be times when I needed to stand in my personal authority. I keep using that word. I don't know where that's coming from. Know that the game, which is to not piss off people who have, power over you, was going to be something that was going to be a constant in my life. And so if I were to write my story in the way that you're presenting today, my authority story, I think there would be moments of anti-authoritarian I would take that would help me to feel my original blueprint more clearly and boldly. And I was supported in that, actually, by my grandparents were often very proud of me for getting into trouble with the right people.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's what I have to contribute. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, John Lewis says that, doesn't he? Make good trouble.
Oh, there you go. Yes.
And, in a way, congressman and, hero and everything else, in terms of the official strand, but he certainly had the community strand going all the way back.
Yes.
But he was what you're saying, he was encouraging young people make good trouble.
Right.
He says, I've been talking about good trouble all my life. So, you couldn't criticize John Lewis now. But yeah, he was saying, make good trouble.
But that's the nice thing about Cynthia's story about her high school teacher.
Yeah.
To say, you can write in such a way you can change the world. That's making good trouble too.
Yeah.
But that's a really nice concept in relation to the community strand. Because I think this has been a really innovative forum today, because I think putting together, you may have had it already in your thoughts, Peter, but through the discussion, putting together the idea of the importance of authority, the importance to us and our truth line part of authority in the community strand, and of it tending to maybe have a rebellious side to it. That goes right back to the beginning you were talking about last week. It goes back to the wise women who redefined as witch troublemakers. It's in the roots of the community strand, and it's really exciting compared to all the credence the official authority strand gets and the community strand doesn't.
Yeah, and I think if we can, and I'd like help on it, I've got more study I want to do on this, but I think it's almost, I know that there was one man, and I think he was supported by nurses, and he was ridiculed for his point of view because he wanted to get surgeons to wash their hands. Right.
Yeah,
it's not that long ago, like, I don't know, 150 years or something, but you know, but I think for sure there were wise women during the Black Plague who said, what you've got to do is what we call quarantine. That's what we have to do. And then at that point, the official strand was putting the whole thing in terms of religion, and we're being punished by God for something or other. And it was the wise women who were saying quarantine, you know, quarantine and hygiene, they're the important things. And if you bring that all the way forward now, you know, wash your hands, put on a mask, you know, social distancing, quarantine when you're infected. Yeah, it's good trouble.
Peter, there's an interesting story from Derbyshire. I went on a holiday as a teenager, and the plague arrived with a bolt of cloth to this village in Derbyshire that was otherwise at the time unaffected by the plague. Well, I don't know which wave that it was. And the villagers voluntarily quarantined themselves. And there's a special stone outside the village where neighboring village people came and gave them food so that the people who didn't get it could survive. So that probably was instigated by a wise woman.
Yes, yes. Okay. Well, we'll wind it down there. My room is getting darker. The seasons are changing. Yeah, I'm Peter, and I'm in a town called King's Lynn in England. Yeah, anyway, yeah, thank you for coming today. It was because I had not presented this before, I think.
Thank you all.
Okay. You got to say where you are, Nan.
Oh, I'm in Cincinnati.
Okay.
And thank you for calling me, Peter.
That's
and
okay.
reminding me. I looked at the clock. I was like, oh, I can log on.
Okay.
Great to see you, Nan. Or not
Good
to see you, but
you
to hear
guys.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Did you get the information in the chat about?
I did. So we're
great,
good.
great.
Okay,
Great.
cool. We're good. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Mary?
Yes,
you
sorry.
there?
Mary from Rosarito Beach, Mexico.
Okay.
And really, really enjoyed it. I was very excited by today. Thank you, Peter.
Cynthia?
I'm Cynthia. I'm in Kankakee, Illinois, and this was really good today for me as well. Thank you.
Okay. Tamar?
And I'm Tamara, San Francisco, and I really enjoyed today as well. Thank you all.
Okay. How is the air?
It's really been bad.
Okay.
It's yeah, I'm thinking I'm going to be canceling a meditation retreat that I signed up for, but it's really close to the fires.
Yeah.
So we're burning up.
Well, our thoughts with you, really.
Thank you.
Stacy?
I'm Stacy in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I got a lot out of today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cease?
Cecilia Cease Yoakum, Tampa, Florida. I liked looking at different ways about authority, not just in a job, but in different parts of our lives.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for coming.
Nikki.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
I'm
Nikki.
It's all right. I'm Nikki, Wimbledon, London. Yeah, thanks for today, everybody.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye
Right,
for
thank
now.
you. Right, bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.